My name is Sharnita Johnson, and I'm from Detroit. Now, I know some of you are thinking, gosh, I'm really sorry. Because as long as I can remember, when I told people I was from Detroit, I get one of two reactions. Either, you don't seem like you're from Detroit, whatever that means, or fear. I was living in New York at a time when it was considered one of the most dangerous cities in the US. Yet when I tell people I was from Detroit, they literally recoil and back away from me in fear. Now, I'm not a scary person. I'm only 5 feet tall. And while I have been called fierce, it's more like 2 snaps and those shoes you're wearing are fierce, girl. It even happens when I travel. I had the opportunity to visit Cuba a number of years ago. And the Cubans know all about Detroit because of all of the old cars on the island. But when I told an older gentleman that I was from Detroit, he grabbed my arm protectively and said, "Oh, things are really bad there." Now, the average Cuban lives on less than $30 a month. There's a unique narrative about Detroit, and it's the only place I know where the center city is so maligned, even by the people who live there. What do you think about Detroit? Be honest. This is not my house. And this is not where I went to school. And I don't dodge bullets on the way to work. But narratives are powerful, and they can be dangerous. I want to tell you just how powerful and just how dangerous. Let me introduce you to a place where 2 out of 5 children live in abject poverty every day, where infant mortality for blacks is 3 times that for whites, and where they're struggling mightily to educate their children. Sound like the Detroit you know? That's Grand Rapids. That's happening here. I'm willing to bet that you didn't know some of these things about Grand Rapids, but it just goes to show just how similar both cities are and just how much we have in common. I'd like to tell you about the Detroit I know. This is the house I grew up in. My parents moved from public housing into a middle-class neighborhood, and they were so proud of what they were able to accomplish and what it meant for their children. This is my father. He's an entrepreneur, because trust me, he couldn't work for anybody else. So in 1969, he opened his business at the corner of Finkel and Linwood in the heart of the community where the Detroit civil unrest occurred. And for the last 40 years, it's been his corner of the world where he's worked day and night to provide his children with the opportunities that he didn't have. I'm the first college graduate in my family, and I stand here today, the embodiment of my parents' dreams. But I'm not unique. There are stories like mine all over Detroit. I'm fortunate because my work allows me to give back not only to Detroit, but to the entire state. I'm a program officer with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Will Keith Kellogg, you might know him from your breakfast table, established the foundation more than 80 years ago with the guidance that we use the money for the health, happiness, and well-being of children. And we endeavor to do that each day. I could talk a lot about the work that we do in Detroit and Grand Rapids, but what's most important is that we believe communities have the inherent capacity to solve their own problems. And knowing Detroit and Grand Rapids as I do, I know that Grand Rapids is more than downtown revitalization and tourist attractions, and I know that Detroit is more than ruin porn and Midtown. And both communities are struggling with poverty, declining schools, a history of racial discrimination, and declining populations. But both communities are working on change. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to some community leaders in both places. This is Alice Thompson. Alice has been with Black Family Development for more than 35 years. And she works to ensure that Detroit voices are at the table every day. She runs a multi-million-dollar organization that serves thousands each year. But it's not so much what Alice does, but how she does it. When she learned that a young man was in danger of not graduating from high school, Not only did she know exactly who he was, who his parents were, what school he attended, but she got on the phone immediately with his principal to problem solve. Alice works all over the city of Detroit, yet she knew this one kid in this one school, and she was determined not to let him fail. That's what makes Alice special, and that's what makes her drive community change. But just like Detroit, Grand Rapids has leaders too. This is Daryl Ross and Jeremy DeRue, co-executive directors of Link. Now you might imagine that they have very different backgrounds. Daryl is a lifelong Grand Rapids resident, and Jeremy grew up on a Canadian dairy farm. But they work together at Link, improving the Madison Square neighborhood by building low and moderate income housing. They roll up their sleeves every day and improve their neighborhood, one person, one job, one house at a time. But community organizations aren't the only ones making change in their communities. Remember my dad and his store? He didn't have access to loans or grants, and his neighborhood wasn't slated for revitalization. But just like many minority entrepreneurs, he survived on his grit and ingenuity. And just like Black Family Development and Link, he became an anchor in his neighborhood because big box stores aren't coming to places like Finkel and Linwood. But these are two cities with the same problems, yet Grand Rapids may not identify with Detroit and vice versa. We don't often put ourselves in others' shoes, and we don't often look at other communities, especially, let's be honest, when they don't look like us. But we all want the same things, and we endeavor to create change in our communities. And we're all connected as Michiganders and as people. We need a strong Detroit just as much as we need a strong Grand Rapids, and everyone from Marquette to Midland is affected by what happens in our urban areas. So, do you have a different impression of me now than you did when I told you I was from Detroit at the beginning of this talk? Do you have a different impression of Detroit? I hope so. Because we need to talk more about pure Michigan and less about ruin and decay. Because there are good things happening in both cities, and we have a connected fate. So, let me reintroduce myself. I'm Sharnita Johnson, and I'm from Detroit. Thank you.